The man on the horse cursed, not understanding what was wrong with the horse. The boy asked the Lord to make a stop, since they had come a long way and the weather was getting worse. But the man exclaimed that he was a fool, since they were at the devil's swamps, and they needed to get out of there quickly. The count was indignant that even the weather seemed to curse this place, and this useless girl was with them too. The guy asked the milord to be quieter, because she might hear, but the man didn't care. Annette Hayworth, princess of the Hayworth kingdom, agreed with the man that she was useless. The Devil's Marsh they are now passing through serves as a border that separates the Arkan Empire and the Kingdom of Hayworth in the south of the continent from the Bayandor Empire in the north. But the blood of local demonic beasts is a deadly poison for people. Those who are exposed to the creature's poison and who do not undergo purification at the temple usually die or become horribly injured. That's why people in the village have been terrified of monsters since ancient times. And Annette, born with the same eye color as the creatures, was called the seed of demonic beasts and was never considered a princess. The girl wondered what kind of princess she was, and they locked her in a small room in the hopes of her quick death. To somehow survive, Annette became a knight, but due to a wound received in her last battle, the girl had to leave behind the sword to which she had dedicated half her life. And now the princess was literally sold into a political marriage, which the girl did not want. She was ready to die, just to avoid marrying this monster. Esther Hayworth, Her Majesty of the Kingdom. Hayworth advised Bridget to think carefully, because everything is not so bad. Bridget Hayworth, Annette's half-sister, exclaimed that she hated him because they said he had an ugly face. How could Bridget live her whole life with such a monster? Justin Hayworth, His Majesty of the Kingdom of Hayworth, put his hand under his head in irritation. Princess Annette arrived and the girl politely greeted their majesties. The princess curtsied, but her father told the girl to leave the greetings. They were of no use, straight to the point. Justin said that the Arkan Empire proposed an alliance. Annette was very surprised by this news, because this was a golden opportunity for her. Father said that even someone as worthless as Annette should understand that thanks to this alliance, the Arkan Empire will help them contain the Bendor Empire, which is constantly trying to attack. Therefore, Annette will marry Archduke Harzent from the Arkan Empire. The girl was very surprised that she was getting married and not Bridget. Esther smiled slyly and asked if Annette was currently retired due to an injury, so it would be better for her to benefit the kingdom by marrying this Archduke than to sit there as a parasite. Now Annette understood why people who usually didn't want to see a hair of her suddenly invited her to their place. Archduke Cardan Harzent, second in line to the throne of the Arkan Empire, a war hero who fought in countless battles without ever knowing defeat. But Cardan lost his beautiful face to the monster's blood, and now he hides his disfigured face behind a mask so that no one can see his ugliness. Annette had in mind that this was a marriage with the Arkan Empire, so the power-mad Queen Esther was probably trying to marry Bridget. But since the groom is Archduke Harzent, Bridget must have thrown a terrible fit because of his disfigured face, Annette reasoned. Esther asked the king not to be so cruel to Annette. Perhaps the princess would still fall in love with the Arkan Empire. Bridget said that the Empire was asking for a princess with pure hereditary blood, and added sarcastically that everyone could see that her sister was far from noble. Annette decided to obey, and if it came down to it, she had to strengthen the alliance between their countries at any cost. No matter how Archduke Harzent treats the princess, the safety of the Kingdom of Hayworth is at stake, so she must do everything possible. The girl's thoughts were interrupted by something that flew through the window, smashing it to pieces. Annette was surprised to see the arrow and began to examine it, the red shaft and ominous plumage. This is the sign of the Empire of Bendor. The princess did not understand how they knew about her secret transfer to the Arkan Empire. From the street came cries of demonic beasts advancing. Annette looked out of the carriage and exclaimed at what she saw Bendor's arrow, and behind it a horde of monsters. Princess Hayworth turned around when she heard a strange sound. One of the demonic beasts was already rushing towards Annette. Of all the retinue, the Count of the Kingdom of Hayworth remained sitting on the ground. He ordered the creatures not to approach him. But the demonic animals didn't care about his requests. They threw them at the Count, and he screamed, calling for help. Annette unexpectedly came to the rescue and easily dealt with the monster, cutting it in half. The princess asked the Count to hide behind her. They don't know the number of monsters, so they need to stay together. But seeing the monster's blood, the man ran away from there in fear. Annette turned around to look at the monsters. She didn't even know how many of them there were. Demonic beasts of the second rank and above, they were in the forest and on the rocks. There were at least 30 of them. Annette doesn't have a sword, and she has no comrades nearby to cover her back, and she'll have to fight with her unfamiliar left hand. But the princess will make an exception and deal with them with her bare hands, because she cannot allow the alliance to fall apart. Annette began to wrap some kind of leaf around her wrist for protection. There were too many creatures even for the swamps, and Annette wondered if the Count and the others had returned safely to the kingdom. It was hot. The princess's body felt like it was on fire. She couldn't understand if it was because of the monster's blood. There was a guard at the gate. He was surprised to see the girl in the forest. The guard warned that this was the imperial castle of the Arkan Empire. He asked the girl to stop and identify herself. Hearing that Annette had come to the gates of the Arcana Empire, she became happy and began to take out something, asking the guards to take it and give it to the emperor. The girl had barely managed to say that she was Hayworth when she fell to the ground, exhausted. In the morning, Annette woke up in a bright room and didn't understand where she was. The princess stood up and realized that she was in the palace of the Arkan Empire, which meant that the emperor and empress had confirmed the marriage contract. Annette said out loud that it was a relief, but when she cleared her throat, she didn't recognize her own voice. The princess looked in the mirror and saw a little girl who looked very much like her. Realizing that it was she, only in the form of a child, Annette screamed in fear. She did not understand what had happened to her. 24 years ago, in the kingdom of Hayworth, the queen gave birth to Annette, and her father immediately called the girl the spawn of a demonic beast. Unlike the entire Hayworth royal family, which was famous for its beautiful silver hair, the princess was born with a fiery shock of hair and crimson eyes, just like those of monsters. Holding Annette in his arms, Justin screamed and asked what was wrong with the queen. The maid said that she was no longer alive. When the beautiful and kind queen died immediately after the birth of the red-haired princess, King Hayworth became furious and refused to acknowledge the princess as his daughter. He turned away from her. Justin considered Annette the curse of their house, such a rare hair color, unheard of in her mother's family or anywhere else on the continent, and on top of that, those red eyes. Could the princess really be the seed of a demonic beast? When did the queen manage to contact the monster? The king wondered. And so, after the death of the queen and the birth of the red-haired princess, she approached King Hayworth, who had abandoned his duties and spent his days in drunkenness. It was Esther, once the late queen's maid, now the queen herself. The king fell madly in love with her and gradually began to erase all traces of the past, even if it was his own child. 3 men entered the building, and one said that an order had been given to vacate Prince Franz's palace. The maid was indignant. Where could His Highness be transferred if not to the palace of the Crown Prince? Moreover, Franz Hayworth, the eldest son of the late Queen and King Hayworth, is in such poor health that if he moves in such cold weather, he might get sick. The man extended his hand to the maid and told her not to worry, as they would take good care of His Highness. Franz left on his own and told Sarah that he was fine, and there was no need to worry about him. It was better for her to take care of the newborn child, his little sister, because she was much weaker. Sarah froze. She didn't want to let the still small and weak Franz fall into the hands of these men. The man said that in addition, the seed of the red demonic beast should be imprisoned in a separate palace, and asked Sarah to give the child. But Sarah was not going to give up the child. The maid said that she would be the one who would take care of the princess and warned the men not to dare even lay a finger on her. And so Sarah, the late queen's close servant and Prince Franz's nanny, went to a separate palace with the red-haired princess, and 6 years passed in contempt and ridicule. Annette complained to Sarah that the maids outside the palace walls were calling her the seed of a demonic beast, and the girl asked what if she really was a spawn and would end up hurting the nanny. Sarah squeezed the princess's hand and said that this was not true at all. The nanny asked Annette to forget these nonsense, because she is not the seed of a demonic beast. Her destiny is to find happiness, therefore even if it is hard and painful, the princess must endure. But soon after Annette turned 7, her nanny died of illness. It was not a serious illness. Sarah only caught a cold because there was no firewood. The cold developed into pneumonia and the nanny died without receiving a single dose of medicine. Then, in her 14th year, Annette came to the king with the queen, but they were not at all happy to see her there. The red-haired princess decided that instead of a worthless life in captivity, she wanted to try to live for real, even if she had to die. Annette dropped to one knee and saluted the great son of Hayworth, begging to be allowed to take part in the upcoming hunt for the demonic beasts. Just think, she managed to survive in that palace where Justin left her to die, and now she's back and asking to fight the beasts. The king wondered if it would not be better if this nuisance died while hunting and returned as a corpse. And so the red-haired princess was allowed to take part in the hunt for animals, contrary to general expectations that the girl, who had never trained, would die. Annette returned from the hunt alive. With her unique, incredible strength and resilience, tireless endurance and sharp wit, Annette became known as the greatest swordswoman on the continent, cursed by demonic beasts. It was her, but what happened to the princess that she began to look like a little child? Annette looked at her hands and noticed that they were very small. The princess grabbed her cheeks and said that her body was also soft, but even in this state, her grip was still tight. Annette wondered how she got to this point. Two people entered the princess's room and were delighted to see that Annette had woken up. The girl sat down and told Annette that she had been told that the princess would be unconscious for a long time, and the man behind her said that perhaps he should call the imperial physician. After hearing the words about the imperial physician, the little girl realized that these were the emperor and empress of the Arkan Empire. Annette curtsied and politely greeted them. Lucius Arkan, His Majesty of the Empire. Arkan was surprised. Charlotte Arcand, Her Majesty of the Empire. Arcand asked Annette to stand up and said that she should not curtsy in her condition. Lucius said that he guessed from the color of her hair that it was Princess Hayworth, but he was embarrassed that she looked so much like a child. Annette was upset that others also saw her as a child. The princess only hoped that this would not create obstacles to the union. Annette had never worn a dress like this before. Even Bridget's outfits weren't so luxurious. She asked her to wear this. But as far as the princess knew, there were no princesses in the Arkan Empire, so where did they get girls' clothes from? The maid informed Her Highness that they had arrived at the banquet hall. Annette was surprised why they had come to the banquet hall and not to the reception room. The beauty of the hall and the amount of food that she had never seen before made the princess cover her face with her hands, as if everything was shining. Lucius said they thought Annette might not have eaten anything since arriving, so they brought her to the banquet hall instead of the reception room. Charlotte said they had prepared a little of everything, as they were not sure what Lady Hayworth liked, and asked her not to be shy. Annette sat down hesitantly. Everything looked very appetizing, and the princess did not know where to start, but decided to try the soup first. During her hikes, Annette ate only tree root infusions and wondered if this soup would be as bitter. But the taste of this soup was incomparable. The princess's eyes sparkled. She thought she was in heaven. Annette couldn't believe that such a taste existed. Warm, tender, and so pleasantly warming from the inside. This warmth calmed the girl's soul. Charlotte asked the princess if she liked it, to which Annette replied that it was very tasty. The emperor and empress were pleased that Lady Hayworth enjoyed their treat. Annette had already eaten everything, smiled and thanked Charlotte and Lucius for their concern. Charlotte asked Lucius if he had informed the Duke that Lady Hayworth had arrived, and the emperor replied that she had written to him as soon as they had confirmed the princess's identity. Annette was curious about how Grand Duke Harjant reacted to this, so she asked the couple what he said. Lucius said that, unfortunately, the Duke is currently hunting demonic beasts. The Emperor sent a message to the Duke's house, but the campaign will not end soon. The Emperor said that it would likely be a long time before the Duke could come to the capital, but Annette considered this simply an excuse he would not want to see the monster's seed. Charlotte asked the princess not to worry. The Duke would come to the capital as soon as he received news. Annette said that everything was fine, and in any case, she was not in a condition to show herself to him. Since the topic was brought up, Annette decided to ask if she had been like this when they found her. The Emperor confirmed that if it hadn't been for the marriage vows and the lock of red hair in the concert, they wouldn't have recognized her. Annette decided to warn their majesties that there might be a traitor in the kingdom of Hayworth who was in cahoots with the Empire of Bendor. The princess told everything that happened to her on the way to the Arkan Empire, how an arrow flew into the carriage, and immediately after that, demonic beasts attacked them. Annette said that it was undoubtedly the red arrow of the Bendor Empire. She had no weapon, so she used this arrow to defeat the beast. The Arkan Empire was unaware of the princess's arrival, so information leaked to the Bendor Empire from the Kingdom of Hayworth. They will probably hold Hayworth accountable, and for this reason they may even break the alliance. If that happens, how can Annette convince them otherwise? Lucius clarified with the princess that the people from the Hayworth Kingdom had abandoned the princess and fled. Charlotte gasped and asked Annette if it was true that she had fought the demonic beast with a single arrow, and then with her bare hands. Annette felt a little uncomfortable with the strange atmosphere in the room. The princess said that the beast was so strong that her escort would hardly be able to cope with it. Lucius said that they cannot turn a blind eye to this and will send a protest to the kingdom of Hayworth. Since the information could leak out, the emperor decided to inform Hayworth that the princess was wounded but had arrived safely in the empire. Annette inquired about what would happen to the alliance. Lucius replied that although the marriage vows had not yet been confirmed since they had been signed, Annette was already a member of the Arkan imperial family. Charlotte happily added that they would soon become one family, and she suggested that they relax and become a little closer. In the meantime, Annette should focus on recovery until the Duke arrives. Charlotte thought that everything ended relatively well. The princess asked again, puzzled. The Empress explained that when Annette fainted, the imperial physician examined her and said that, apart from a couple of minor bruises, the girl had no other injuries. The doctor also said that the princess was simply exhausted, so medicine and good rest would be enough. Charlotte happily noted that this also meant that Annette's injured arm was now completely fine too. Annette was overjoyed to hear that she could hold a sword again. The princess looked at her hand and couldn't believe that she could hold a sword again. What would they say if this news reached the Hayworth kingdom? As soon as Annette got injured, they immediately sent her into retirement, as if this was what they were waiting for. If they found out that her arm was healed, they could call it a monster's curse. But, however, this no longer concerns the princess, because the union will take place. Annette came out of her thoughts and noticed how the emperor and empress were looking at her. This made the princess a little embarrassed. Charlotte told Lucius that Annette looked about 7 years old. Lucius replied that the princess was built like Michael, so he would say closer to 8. The emperor and empress continued to discuss the child's appearance as if the princess were not there at all. Annette spoke up, saying that she thought she was about 10 years old, but it seemed she had become even younger. The couple felt a little embarrassed when they realized that Annette had heard their conversation. Lucius almost forgot that he had something to give to the princess. The emperor handed Annette a purification stone. Since she had been exposed to the blood of the demonic beast, she should undergo purification in the temple. But Lucius was afraid that in the princess's current state, it would be difficult to enter the temple. Annette said that it would be safer if as few people as possible knew about her health, and besides, she felt more comfortable using the stone than going to the temple. The princess believed that it was better to purify herself alone with the stone than to go to the temple. Previously, when Annette visited the temple in the Hayworth kingdom, the priests looked at her with disdain. The Stone of Purification is a masterpiece created by Emperor Lucius, who used all the powers of the temple and the magic tower to create it. If the blood of a monster gets on the body, it can be used to cleanse oneself. Therefore, all knightly orders and mercenaries, except for the Royal Knightly Order of Hayworth, when going hunting, always stop in the capital of the Arkan Empire to buy stones. The Hayworth kingdom probably didn't want to allocate budget for Annette since she was the commander. Just as the princess wanted to take the stone, she hesitantly removed her hand. There is no record of the Royal Knights of Hayworth ever purchasing purification stones, the princess told the emperor. Lucius, still holding the stone in his hand, asked if Annette knew how to use it. The princess confirmed that she was once given such a stone, and the emperor was happy about it. A modest girl entered the hall and, asking for forgiveness, announced that Her Majesty the Dowager Empress had invited the newly arrived princess for tea. Lucius looked at Charlotte in confusion and asked if she had already told her mother. The Empress confirmed that she had no choice. She needed to get it urgently. Charlotte told Annette that it looked like she would have to go with the Empress to see Her Majesty that afternoon. The princess looked at Charlotte uncertainly and reminded her of her current condition, to which the Empress said that Her Majesty knew about it, so there was no need to worry. Before coming to Her Majesty, Annette returned to her chambers to prepare and undergo purification, and already standing in front of the Dowager Empress's office, the princess was overcome with fear. Annette was afraid that the Dowager Empress would call off the wedding when she saw her. Charlotte noticed how nervous the princess was and asked her about it. Annette confirmed that she was a little nervous. Charlotte said that she understood her, because the princess was meeting the woman who would become her mother-in-law for the first time, but it was natural to be nervous. The Empress continued to say something about how there was no need to worry and that Her Majesty was a wonderful person, but Annette was again overcome with a feeling of anxiety. The princess was so focused on the union that she did not even think about the Dowager Empress becoming her mother-in-law, which greatly frightened Annette. Charlotte was about to touch the door handle, inviting Annette to enter, but the princess interrupted her. However, having warned the Dowager Empress, Charlotte went into the room and introduced Her Majesty and Annette to each other. Annette curtsied and, having greeted Her Majesty the Dowager Empress, introduced herself. Silence reigned in the hall. The princess glanced slightly at the Empress. Annette did not understand why she did not react in any way. The Dowager Empress was speechless and asking if this child was the betrothed Cardinal. At that moment, Annette realized it was a disaster. At this time, in the borderland near the Devil's Swamps, a man was looking for His Highness. The man stopped and, hiccuping, asked whether His Majesty had dealt with them all alone. The newcomer asked if, since the Duke had put so many creatures to rest, it would be quiet here for about a month. The Duke asked Samuel to shut up or he would kill him, which made the man jump up. Samuel got a little carried away, but that was not why he came. He wanted to report that it seemed Princess Annette Hayworth had arrived at the palace. The Duke froze in surprise at this news. The Duke was glad that his princess had finally arrived. The Dowager Empress was simply speechless at what she saw. Annette looked up and was frightened by the fact that in front of her was the Dowager Empress of the Arkan Empire herself. Does everyone in the imperial family really look so majestic? The princess wondered. Compared to them, Annette was just a child, but Charlotte asked Lady Hayworth to make herself at home. The Empress looked sternly at Annette and asked her if she was the very same Cardina's betrothed. Annette was frightened, and she hesitantly confirmed the Empress's question. The Empress turned away and asked Charlotte if Cardin knew about this. She replied that she had already sent a messenger, but the Grand Duke had gone hunting, so she was not sure if the message had reached her. Her Highness closed her eyes and said that she hoped that everything would reach the Duke safely. The family must love the Duke very much. He is a precious but fragile man to them, Annette thought. So the Emperor personally created a purification stone for his unfortunate younger brother. Lucius also arranged this political marriage, fearing that he would not find a partner, or so Annette believed. Then why were they so kind to the princess, since she was supposed to become the Duke's wife? Annette was a little envious of Cardian. The princess's thoughts were interrupted by the Empress's stern voice. She asked Annette what she was thinking so deeply about. Annette was frightened when the Empress addressed her, and because of her excitement she did not hear what she said. The Empress told the princess to sit down. They would soon become a family, so there was no need for these formalities. Annette sat there, not knowing what to say or how to make a good impression. The Empress looked at the little princess with disdain. Her Highness clapped her hands and said that they were beginning their tea party. With a pop, maids entered the room with carts filled with various foods. Charlotte was surprised at how much the Empress had prepared, to which she replied that this was not the least one could expect. The young Empress noticed that some of the treats did not look like those from the palace, and she asked Her Highness if he had brought them from the capital. The Dowager Empress replied that she did not know their preferences, so just in case she prepared a little bit of everything, and she invited them to try it. Annette had a variety of desserts in front of her that she had never seen before, all so beautiful, like works of art, that her eyes ran wild. The princess didn't know what to do when she was little. Sarah said that elders like children who eat well. Annette picked up a fork and told herself to just try it. The little princess hesitantly put a piece of cake into her mouth. Fresh cream, delicious whipped cream with strawberries, the taste of the cake was amazing. Charlotte was pleased that Lady Hayworth seemed to enjoy the treat. The Empress believed that if Annette was pleased, then Her Majesty the Dowager Empress was certainly pleased too. The princess was afraid that Her Majesty would suddenly think that she was a glutton. Annette was so carried away by the desserts that she completely lost her head. Lady Hayworth broke off a piece of cake and, turning to Her Majesty, said that she must have been too greedy. Annette handed the cake to the Empress and asked her to try it, because it was really very tasty. Her Majesty the Dowager Empress flinched at this action, spilling her tea. Her Majesty immediately fainted, dropping her mug of tea. Annette ran up to Her Majesty and asked what had happened, but Charlotte interrupted her. The Empress said that Lady Hayworth should rest. The princess tried to object, but gave up. Charlotte said that she would take care of Her Majesty, so she asked Annette not to worry and to return to her place. The princess walked down the corridor dejectedly, and behind her was a maid. Annette wanted to say something, but she didn't dare. The maid asked her if she wanted something. Princess Hayworth then asked if Her Majesty often had health problems. This question was not easy for the girl. She did not know how to say it correctly, what words to choose. The maid's reaction confirmed everything. The Empress reacted this way because of Annette. The girl decided to introduce herself to change the topic and said that she was Serena, and the princess could contact her at any time. Then Annette decided to ask Serena if there was a place nearby where she could take a short walk. The maid advised her to go to the back garden. It should be very nice there. However, only members of the ruling family could enter that garden, but fortunately, the Empress said that Annette should be considered a member of the imperial family. The princess couldn't get her head around the idea that they could consider her their family for some reason. She had the feeling that no one even considered the idea that she would return to her former body. As if Annette is the only one who feels uneasy about this, perhaps she can't come to terms with it. Serena pointed to the stairs leading to the garden and asked the princess to be careful. Annette remembered how she had been treated all this time and thought that this place was simply different from the Hayworth kingdom. The princess called out to Serena and she immediately turned around. Suddenly, Annette asked the maid if she was afraid to look her in the eyes. Serena thoughtfully asked the princess why she should be afraid of this. The maid told Lady Hayworth that she had never seen such a beautiful eye color in her life. The maid asked why the princess asked this, but she was already too embarrassed by the unexpected compliment and only hurried away. A normal conversation, they looked into each other's eyes and smiled. Perhaps Annette could live in such a way that she would no longer be despised. Meanwhile, in the Devil's Swamp, Samuel informed the Duke that there seemed to be a problem with the princess. The man handed the Duke a letter from His Majesty the Emperor, which stated that on her way to the Arkan Empire, the princess had encountered an unpleasant incident. The Duke turned to Morton and said that he would go to the capital at once, and they would return to the castle, gather people, and set out. Samuel became worried when he heard that they would go straight to the capital without stopping at the castle. The Duke explained that after such an incident, he must hurry to the palace. The man was eagerly awaiting a meeting with the princess. The Dowager Empress woke up and screamed that she was guilty, because how could one be so nice? It was a crime. Her Highness asked the Empress with displeasure how she could not tell her that Cardan's bride was so cute. Charlotte replied that she did not expect Annette to be so cute. The woman was overjoyed that there would finally be a girl who would wear dresses sewn by the Empress, and it seemed she was not too surprised by Lady Hayworth's body. The Empress Dowager said she was surprised, but with the Emperor's abilities and everything else there would be problems. The more important thing was whether Cardan would tolerate it. Charlotte agreed with Her Highness. The Dowager Empress asked Charlotte if she thought the princess was too thin. Her Highness was literally fired up by the fact that the child should be plump. She suggested that the Empress have a tea party the following afternoon. The Dowager Empress was going to fatten Annette up until her cheeks were plump. Charlotte agreed with her and promised to have tea regularly, after which she finally left. Serena approached Charlotte and the Empress asked if she had escorted Lady Hayworth to her chambers. The maid confessed that the princess wanted to take a little walk, so she took her to the back garden. She also reported that the princess was upset because Her Highness had fainted. Charlotte realized that she had only created unnecessary fuss by trying not to spoil Her Majesty's first impression, and she decided to take a walk in the garden as well. The princess thought that a walk would help relieve this discomfort, but it seems that this is not the case. Apart from the Grand Duke, to keep this engagement going, Annette needed to make a good impression on the imperial family. She thought she had driven Her Highness to the point of fainting. The little boy was indignant that anyone dared to enter the garden, where only members of the imperial family were allowed to go. This child was on the list that Annette looked at before her arrival. It seems it is Crown Prince Michael. Mikhail Arkan, the Crown Prince of the Arkan Empire, asked Annette to immediately identify herself. But the princess did not know whether to say that she would become his aunt in this form, so Annette finally said that she was a foreigner who had come at the invitation of the Empire. Now Michael understood where the lady got such an unusual hair color, but he did not understand how the princess got here. Suddenly, Michael said that he knew that Annette had fallen in love with him and followed him. The princess stood nearby, confused. The boy sarcastically said that he could not accept my lady's feelings, since his heart already belonged to Audrey. Even though Mikhail was the crown prince, Annette still didn't understand who had managed to teach him this. Charlotte called Mikhail over and asked where he was going when he was supposed to be in etiquette class. The girl asked whether Michael had offended Annette, but the princess replied that this was not the case at all, and that rather it was she who had interfered with His Highness. The prince looked at his mother in confusion and asked who this lady was. Charlotte looked at her son with maternal sternness and asked him to be more polite. The Empress said that Annette would soon become part of their family, which made Mikhail very scared. Charlotte told Annette that it was better for the prince to be a little surprised than to be rude to the lady. He would understand everything when the Empress explained the details later. The Empress asked the princess if she was surprised when the Dowager Empress fainted. Annette replied that she was only a little surprised. In fact, Her Highness did this not because she didn't like the princess, but on the contrary, she even said that she would send a surprise gift tomorrow. Annette said it was a relief, but she still wanted to ask the Empress something. The princess asked why Charlotte always called her Lady Hayworth, and the Empress replied that it was because she was a passionate admirer of Annette. Annette's skill in exterminating monsters is famous even in their empire. Charlotte always thought about how incredible the princess was. Charlotte asked where the princess had put Rubelino, who was always with Annette, which surprised her. Rubelino is the name of the sword that is always in Lady Hayworth's possession. Annette returned it to the royal family when she left her post as commander. Charlotte was frightened, because Rubelino was practically Lady Hayworth herself. The Empress asked if they even understood how precious a sword was to a knight. Annette said that everything was fine, since she had already renounced knighthood. Serena entered the room and informed my lady that her bath was ready. It was already quite late. The Empress called Annette, and she looked up at her with interest. Charlotte says this because she thought that Annette might be worried about Duke Argent. He would come as soon as he heard that the princess had arrived. The next day, Annette woke up and thought she had overslept. Serena smiled and said that it was still early, but more importantly, she had news for the princess. They say that His Highness the Grand Duke has arrived at the palace. This news has shaken Annette. Serena said that it seemed the Duke left as soon as he heard from the princess. They say he arrived this morning. This seemed strange to Annette. Usually the journey from the Duke to the capital takes at least a day, but she heard the news in the evening, and he arrived today. How did he get there so quickly? Annette asked the maid what kind of person the Grand Duke was. She was interested in what he was like. The princess asked Serena to tell her at least something. The maid didn't know what to do, whether she should tell the truth. Serena said that she rarely saw the Duke up close, so she doesn't know for sure, but she heard that he is a very wise and capable man. Perhaps the princess herself will understand when she meets him. Annette reflected that the Duke did not seem to be the type to let people get close to him. The princess entered the hall, and the Emperor and Empress were delighted and said that Annette looked very cute. Annette walked hesitantly into the hall. Her Majesty was so kind that she sent a whole collection of dresses as a gift. That way, the Grand Duke won't be scared and call her sinister when he sees her. Annette thought she was only meeting the Duke if she had known they were waiting too. She would have come earlier, but they dropped in for a minute in case something went wrong. The princess tensed when she heard that something might happen. Grand Duke Hargant was late, but he was not one to keep himself waiting. Samuel asked His Highness to slow down, as he himself could not keep up with the Duke. The Duke abruptly opened the door to the hall, and Samuel shouted, introducing His Highness the Grand Duke of Hargant to everyone. Annette looked at the Duke and was frightened by his grandeur. The Duke entered the hall and stared at the princess. The Grand Duke rushed unceremoniously towards Lady Hayworth, frightening her. The man towered over poor Annette and wondered if he was even human. Annette was frightened and looked at the Duke in confusion. The Emperor and Empress became nervous and tried to stop the Duke. The man said that Annette is not a person but a doll. A person cannot be so sweet, just doll-like sweetness, the Duke admired. The man extended his hand to the princess and asked if he could take her hand. An hour earlier, Samuel had tried to tactfully hurry the Duke by asking if he knew what time it was getting ready. The Duke stood in front of the mirror and asked Samuel what suited him best. Samuel said that both suited the Duke, but he was thinking about how long he had been hanging around in front of the mirror since he returned to the palace. The assistant told the Duke the time, but he asked if Samuel was bored. The guy replied that he was in no way bored with the Duke, and she, in turn, asked Samuel to watch carefully to see if he looked strange and if everything was okay. The assistant irritably replied to the man that he was the very picture of greatness. The Duke looked in the mirror and thought that if she was afraid of him, since this was their first official meeting, maybe it would be better to take something lighter. Samuel said that the princess was the greatest swordswoman, but the Duke brushed it off because Annette was a child now, and besides, he wanted to appear gentle and caring. The assistant showed His Majesty the watch and said that it was time. The Duke was frightened. It was already late. He irritably asked Samuel why he hadn't told him earlier. His Majesty swung the door open, grumbling at his assistant along the way. The Emperor was frightened by what the Duke was doing, and the Empress smiled nervously. The Duke knelt down and asked the princess for permission to take her hand. Annette looked at him with confusion and allowed him to take her hand, but she was wondering how this man could be a warmonger and a ruthless killer. The Emperor thought that the Duke had completely lost his mind. He knew, of course, that his brother would put on a show, but not so openly and brazenly. Lucius was brought out of his thoughts by Charlotte, who nudged him with her shoulder. The Emperor cleared his throat and said that the Duke had arrived just in time. The Duke turned around at the sound of his brother's voice and pretended to have just noticed him. The Emperor said that of course he was here, because this was the first meeting of those who would lead the alliance between the Arkan Empire and the Hayworth Kingdom. The Duke would like to greet the one with whom he will spend the rest of his life in private, so he would be grateful if their Majesties would leave them for a few minutes. She looked up in confusion at the words that the Duke would spend the rest of his life with the princess. The emperor was indignant, saying that Duke Harjent seemed to have forgotten who was in front of him. Lucius was angry that the Duke was making fun of him, but he did not calm down and asked why the emperor was looking at him like that. Charlotte said that their presence might be a little inconvenient, so she suggested to His Majesty that the couple leave. The emperor looked at his wife with confusion. The empress literally pushed her husband out of the hall while he was saying that she herself wanted to see this spectacle. The Duke bowed and asked for forgiveness. She had just shown herself in a less than favorable light. The princess said that this was not the case at all and invited the man to sit down next to her. Annette did not understand why the Duke was more caring towards her than towards His Majesty. Was it possible that the blood of the demonic beast had not only disfigured his appearance, but also damaged his mind? For some time, the Duke and the princess sat in silence, looking at each other. The man said that he felt awkward when the princess looked at him so intently. He was much shyer than he appeared. Annette looked away so as not to embarrass the Duke. She did not understand what was happening. Everything was not at all as she imagined. The man extended his hand and decided to present it again, correctly. The princess, still not understanding what was happening, also introduced herself. The Duke said that Annette had small hands, to which the girl replied that they were not usually like that. After all, she was 24. The man was aware of this. The princess was 2 years older than him. However, the princess became sad and looked away. Annette said that in this body, she would hardly be able to perform the duties that the Duke expected of the Grand Duchess. The man interrupted the princess, not understanding what she was talking about. What kind of duties of the Grand Duchess he expected? What did it mean that Annette could not fulfill them? Annette explained that she was talking about the case in which His Majesty entrusted her with such duties. If he did not wish it, she would do nothing. The Duke did not want to ask about this, so this time he asked directly whether the princess wanted to break off their engagement. The girl said that this was not at all the case, rather. She was afraid that it would be he, the Duke, who would break off the engagement. But if the man allows this marriage to take place, the princess will do everything possible to cope with any task and will not mind at all if the Duke has a mistress. The Duke did not like this and wanted to stop talking about it. The man didn't even know where to begin first. He asked the princess for permission to ask why she thought he would break off their engagement. Annette opened her mouth hesitantly, gathering her strength. The princess said that it was obvious because the Duke would not want to see her as his wife. Annette was sure that the Duke wanted Bridget as his wife, and who would have chosen her anyway? The man said that he had definitely asked for a princess of noble blood as his bride, and when he saw her name, he was calm, because the king, although stupid, was not so stupid that he could not understand what was written. The Duke asked for forgiveness for insulting his homeland and Annette's father. The princess wondered if he really wanted her as a wife, but the girl hesitantly said that perhaps the Duke knew little about her. The Duke realized that they were talking about rumors of a curse. The princess in the kingdom of Hayworth must not have been treated in the best way, the man thought. The man failed to notice that the conditions in which she lived were much harsher and that the people around her were unscrupulous. The princess clearly felt uncomfortable talking about this. She didn't want to scare the Duke. The man said that perhaps he knew the princess better than she thought. The Duke thinks Lady Hayworth is too good for him. The princess mumbled something uncertainly that this was not true at all. But the man insisted on his own. He considered Annette too good for him. He wanted to tell her one secret. The Duke asked the princess to lean forward for a moment to make it easier to speak. The man began to tell Annette a secret, and she thought about how close they were. The information that the Duke said seemed to pierce the princess. The girl looked at the Duke in confusion and said that she thought she had misheard. But the Duke said that the princess had heard everything correctly. He was not the son of the Dowager Empress, but an illegitimate child. The princess said she thought she had misheard, but the Duke replied that this was not so. The Duke said that he was not the son of the Dowager Empress, but an illegitimate child. The late emperor got carried away by entertainment and made a mistake. He could not tarnish the honor of the imperial family, but he could not kill a child of his own blood, so his mother took him in. The man asked if his mother was not an amazing woman, and the princess only gasped in confusion. The Duke politely asked Annette not to make such a face. His mother had raised him as her own son, and he, of course, considered her his mother. In any case, the man found a wonderful mother and brother and grew up very happy. He was lucky. Annette asked the Duke about the woman who gave birth to him. The man replied that she had been promised riches and a new life, so that she would not need anything in exchange for the birth of the Duke. But as he was told, the woman died immediately after giving birth. The princess apologized for asking a tactless question, but it meant nothing to the man. The late emperor may have been playing it safe for fear of future problems, but it was certainly foolish for a woman to reveal her pregnancy and expect to be left alone. The princess asked the duke if it was really necessary to be so categorical. She did not know what to do with this atmosphere. The duke said that the princess was really very kind. The man was sure that his mother would have loved Annette very much. He said that mother would be in seventh heaven if the princess were nearby and would be more proud of her than of anyone, because Annette is extremely valuable. The duke asked if the princess now understood that she was much nobler than him and too good for a bastard like him. The princess did not understand why this man was revealing his weaknesses to her. The duke asked if the princess was disappointed that he was illegitimate. The princess was too deep in her thoughts to hear the duke's question at once. She replied that she was not at all disappointed. This was a relief to the duke, who promised to tell him the next secret when they reached the duchy. The man asked the princess to remember that he was a liar, but not a deceiver. He asked Annette not to worry about returning to her previous appearance. It would take time, but everything would work out. Annette gasped. She was glad that there was a way to return her to her former appearance. And the duke had one more request for the girl. He wouldn't mind if Annette spent the entire fortune of the ducal family, and if she lazed around all day. The man thought about his request. However, the man would like the princess to respect him as a husband, and of course he will reciprocate the girl in kind. The princess lay on her bed and replayed her recent meeting with the duke. Now she understood why the man had reacted so sharply when Annette spoke about her mistress. The princess wondered if the duke really had feelings for her, but where these feelings would come from is strange. A voice was heard from behind the door, saying that the empress had arrived. Annette asked to be let in. The princess greeted the empress, who asked if Annette had dined well. She felt uneasy at the thought that the girl had to eat alone. Annette said that everything was fine, and besides, she had eaten with Serena, and the princess asked how the empress's lunch with the ladies of the court had gone. The dowager empress invited them to tea, and on the way Charlotte asked Annette, who seemed to have become very close to Serena, even calling her by name. The princess did not understand whether Charlotte was upset. She replied that yes, they had become closer, but if Her Majesty wished, she could call Annette by her first name. Annette said that if the empress was uncomfortable, then it would be as before. Charlotte said she was just surprised because she didn't think the princess would let her call her that close. The empress thought that Annette would dine with the duke today, but His Highness went to the temple to certify the marriage contract. Charlotte was delighted, because this meant that the engagement must already be official. The princess gave the duke a lock of her hair. Originally they were both supposed to be present, but since Annette was in such a state, this would be impossible. The man explained to the priest that Annette's health prevented her from attending, adding that he needed a lock of the girl's hair as proof. The princess said that the duke was really something, which seemed to pierce Charlotte. Today the tea party took place outside. The ruling Arkan family has the power of the gods, which is why the temple honors the imperial family. It is therefore unthinkable that the temple would demand proof from a member of the highest family. Charlotte thought the duke had said that out of the blue. The empress asked Annette to take care of the childish duke, but the princess said that he was not like that at all. He was very principled. Charlotte did not understand who she was talking about. The duke also seemed to the princess to be a very decent and diligent man. Charlotte and Serena had no idea who the princess was talking about. The princess said that the duke was also very honest and shy. Charlotte was already sweating. She was nervously trying to understand who they were talking about. Serena also didn't understand who Annette was talking about. Suddenly the dowager empress appeared and asked the princess if Harjent had said so. Her Highness exhaled nervously, her son pretending to be modest. The empress, hearing this, thought that she had misheard. The duke was her son, but she had not raised him to be such a cunning person, so she asked Annette not to blame her later if he deceived her. Annette happily wears the dress that Her Highness gave her. She thanked her and said that she would take care of it. The empress said it was nothing, and asked Annette to wear as many as she wanted, since Her Majesty was keen on sewing, so she had already sewn a whole mountain of dresses for the princess. Annette thanked Her Highness, embarrassed and hesitant. Charlotte and the empress beamed at Annette's charm. Charlotte's attention was drawn to someone. Sir Royce approached the gazebo and excitedly addressed the empress. The princess turned around and asked who Sir Royce was. Charlotte said that he was a knight accompanying Michael. The empress asked irritably why the knight was walking around outside when Michael should have something to do. The knight hesitated, nervously deciding what to say. The empress understood everything since the knight was not with Mikhail. It meant that Mikhail had skipped classes again and run away. Charlotte asked Sir Royce where Mikhail was now. The knight said hesitantly that His Highness the Crown Prince had disappeared, so he went to look for him but could not find him anywhere. Mikhail had never been like this before, and Charlotte didn't know why her son had been acting this way lately. This child cannot concentrate on his studies and is constantly running away somewhere, the Empress thought. The Dowager Empress said that Sir Royce is an experienced bodyguard. Even if he cannot find Mikhail, perhaps he is in a place where bodyguards are not allowed. Charlotte agreed that this was logical and began to think about where the night bodyguard could not enter. Last time, the princess couldn't really see everything. There were no birds singing or any other sounds, as if this place was separate from the rest of the world. Annette stopped. She heard voices. The princess looked around in confusion, trying to find the source. Charlotte led the Empress forward, suggesting that they look there. Annette realized that she heard not one voice, but two. The princess ran up to Charlotte, stopping her. The Empress saw two figures in the distance and wondered if this was Audrey from the house of the Marquise de Melun. What is the prince even thinking? He may still be a child, but bringing strangers into the secret garden, as if Charlotte won't give him a severe reprimand for it, is stupid. Charlotte was about to approach Mikhail and tell him everything, but the Dowager Empress stopped her. The Empress said that she understood Charlotte's feelings, but it was still just daylight, and they would be very scared if the adults appeared suddenly. Besides, Lady Melon is the prince's childhood friend. Most likely it was she who suggested that she come here. Charlotte agreed with the words of the Dowager Empress and decided that it was worth waiting. But the Dowager Empress suggested something slightly different: to come over and listen to what the children were talking about. Charlotte was very nervous, but the Empress told her not to worry. They would hear everything from here, and the children would not notice them. The couple sat by the fountain, while the ladies settled down by the stairs and asked each other if the other was comfortable sitting there. The princess was also curious about what the children were secretly talking about. She thought it was bad to eavesdrop, but since it happened that way, it was even interesting. Audrey asked the prince what was happening to him. The girl said that since they met, Mikhail has done nothing but sigh. Audrey asked if perhaps he had difficult homework. Mikhail said that this was not so. Then the girl asked if maybe he hadn't understood something in class. Audrey said that after the prince's letter, she had to persuade her father to get into the palace. She told him that she would wait in the library. If he came looking for her, there would be problems. Michael asked Audrey if she would still love him if he were not the crown prince. He asked her to tell him honestly. The girl said that of course she would love him whether he was a prince or not. Michael was very happy to hear this. He said that then he would cease to be the crown prince and asked if he could live in Audrey's house as a son-in-law. Her son's statement seemed to kill Charlotte. The Dowager Empress was also shocked. The princess didn't understand what Mikhail was even saying. The crown prince was giving up his title. How could that be? Audrey stuttered nervously and said that she thought it was impossible. How could she just give up her title like that? Michael asked if it was because she didn't want him to stop being a prince, but Audrey replied that that was not the case at all. The girl said that he was talking complete nonsense. Mikhail exclaimed that he said that for the sake of his beloved one must be ready to give up everything. Audrey asked who had told him such a strange thing. The prince said that it was his uncle. The girl said that even if the Duke said so, there was no point in Michael giving up his title. The Dowager Empress grabbed her head, and Charlotte covered her face with her hands. They were very ashamed of Michael. The Empress kept wondering why the prince was behaving so strangely lately. It turns out the Duke had put these strange thoughts into Mikhail's head. But isn't it strange? Mikhail could have met Lady Melon even as the crown prince, so why does he insist on abdication? The Dowager Empress said that it was time for them to go. The prince, of course, said something stupid, but since Lady Melon was so firm, they should not interfere. Charlotte agreed. She would call Mikhail later and talk to him face to face. The Empress stood up and was about to leave, but stepped on a stick. Mikhail immediately turned towards the sound and asked who was there. Charlotte looked at the Dowager Empress in confusion, not knowing what to do. Annette thought hard about what could be done. Mikhail shouted that if the man didn't come out right now, he would come himself. The princess came out from around the corner and apologized for accidentally overhearing the children's conversation. The prince exclaimed, asking Annette how much she had heard, and Audrey asked who the young lady was. The princess smiled sheepishly as the prince tried to explain to Audrey what Annette was doing there. Michael looked at Audrey and noticed that she was crying. The girl said that she thought she was the only one the prince invited here. Audrey did not know that he had someone else, so dear to him that he could not hide, and the relationship was so close that he could not explain. Michael and Annette exclaimed in one voice that this was all just a misunderstanding. The young lady was not the prince's guest. The boy said that Annette was a guest invited by his mother, but it seemed that this young lady could be his fiancée. The prince asked Audrey to understand him correctly. He didn't need anyone but her, but the princess's only thoughts in her head were about what kind of misunderstanding this was. Audrey sadly said that she was fine and the prince didn't need to do this for her. Michael screamed that he only wanted Audrey, so he would give up the throne for her. The princess was horrified by what was happening. A huge column was flying towards the children, which for some reason seemed to fall apart. The princess, Audrey, and Michael looked in horror at the huge pieces of the column. The Duke came to his brother and asked him to guess what he had in his hands. The man happily said that this was an engagement certificate from the temple, and now he was officially engaged to the princess. The emperor asked if his brother had come to show off, but he had ignored him last time. The Duke simply thought that his brother was bored, so he dropped by. The emperor was surprised at how easily he lied and asked where the princess was now. Lucius asked if it was okay if he postponed the wedding if something happened. It was fine, but who knows, maybe it would happen again, so it was better to sort it out now. The Duke couldn't rely on his brother forever when his body was changing. He thought it was even better this way. The man asked the emperor not to look at him like that. It was not what he thought. This girl has been alone since childhood. If so, the Duke wants to take care of her and protect her. The man asked Sir Malene if he knew the princess, and he replied that he had remembered her face when the emperor placed Annette at the top of the palace guard list. As far as the Duke could see, the princess was about the same age as the Marquise's daughter, and he wondered what girls her age usually liked besides dolls and sweets. Sir Melon said that their Audrey had been weak since childhood, so she loved to read at home, and the emperor asked him teasingly that Lady Melon loved their Mikhail most of all. The emperor and Sir Melon began to argue about which of the children loved whom, and the Duke decided to settle on the fact that they had mutual sympathy. A loud sound alerted the brothers. The emperor and the Duke looked out the window, trying to understand what had happened. Lucius and his brother looked at each other nervously. They probably knew something. The brothers realized that something had happened at the secret garden. The boys looked at the pile of stones that was falling on them in horror and didn't understand what to do. The princess realized that she had to somehow save the children. Annette picked up the children and tried to throw them away from the incident. The boys found themselves a meter from the place where the tower fell. The princess struggled to get up, and Mikhail immediately jumped up and hurried to Audrey. The prince tearfully asked his friend to open her eyes. Annette said that she seemed to have fainted and asked not to shake Audrey so hard. Charlotte and the Dowager Empress came running to the scene. Charlotte said that she was indebted to Annette, thanking her for saving her, and the Dowager Empress asked her grandson if he was hurt. The brothers ran into the garden asking what was going on. Mikhail looked at his father and uncle, and his eyes filled with tears. The Empress said that Lady Melon had lost consciousness, so she would be taken away from here first. The Emperor said that Marquis Melon remained outside and asked the woman to hurry. The princess watched as the Empress carried Audrey away and hoped that she was not too badly hurt. The Duke looked at the princess and said that it was no use talking. She herself had suffered. Annette turned to face him, and the man was frightened when he saw her. The princess asked hesitantly whether the Duke's visit to the temple had been a success. The Duke understands that it is not Annette's fault what happened to her, but it still hurts him to look at her wounds. The man took out a rag and wiped the princess's wound, and she, asking for forgiveness, said that it was nothing serious and that she would soon recover. The Duke asked Annette what she was apologizing for, and she replied that she was apologizing for possibly upsetting His Majesty. The princess was pouting. She tried so hard, and the Duke didn't even praise her. Annette was horrified that she was behaving like a child, and the Duke asked her to promise something. The man asked the princess to take care of herself from now on. The Duke said that the princess was covered in cuts and blood, but did not say a word about pain. Annette looked at him in confusion. The man looked at Annette lovingly, examining her and waiting for an answer. The princess also looked at the Duke with embarrassment. She replied that she would take care of herself. Suddenly, the Emperor said that they needed to find out what exactly had happened. The Empress closed her son's eyes. The Duke quickly turned to his brother and turned Annette away from him. The princess was embarrassed. First a failure, then a look with the Duke. She seemed to be lost. The Empress lightly nudged her son and asked him to repeat what he had said recently. Mikhail asked from what point it should be repeated. Charlotte said she heard it all from the beginning, how he told Audrey that he would leave his family, give up his title, and become a son-in-law in Melon's house. The Emperor was horrified by what the Empress said, and she continued to repeat her son's words that if you truly love, you must be ready to give up everything. Charlotte looked sternly and meaningfully at the Duke and asked her son who taught him this. The Duke said with embarrassment that he should not say such a thing as a loyal subject of the Empire. He could not say such things to the Crown Prince. The emperor looked sternly at his brother, and he said that it was a misunderstanding, just a misunderstanding. The duke did indeed say this, but he asked his nephew if the prince remembered what his uncle had explained to him before. The man repeated that strength is needed to protect a loved one and their happiness, but if you focus on strength alone, you can forget the beginning. He must be ready to give up everything for the sake of his beloved. The duke asked if his nephew were to give up everything, would he be able to protect Lady Melon, and in the end, the prince simply followed his own desires. The emperor always taught his son that the Arkan Empire and its people were the main treasures of his life. Just think, the prince treats his title like that. Is it really such a trifle? The emperor and empress stood over the prince, and he exclaimed that this was not so. He was wrong. But still, if being a crown prince means marrying someone he doesn't love, then Michael doesn't want to be one. He exclaimed that he won't marry this lady and pointed to Annette. The emperor wearily put his hand to his face, and Charlotte told her son that it was just a misunderstanding, which left him completely confused. The duke called his nephew and, lifting him up in his arms, said that this was his princess. Annette shyly asked to let her go. Michael asked in confusion if the princess was his uncle, and the empress replied that that was exactly it. The duke asked Michael why he was looking at him like he was some kind of pervert. After everything that happened, the prince fell down exhausted, but Charlotte managed to catch him. The emperor knew that those present were curious about many things, but he would explain everything another time. The empress and the emperor took Mikhail and left first, and the duke told the princess that the prince had simply fainted from fatigue. Annette looked at the duke in confusion and asked why, but she already had some guesses in her head. His Majesty turned to the princess, and she asked about this recent incident. Annette asked if what happened was related to His Majesty the Crown Prince. The princess began to suspect something, looked at the duke and asked if this incident was connected with Crown Prince Michael. The duke smiled and said that, as expected, their princess was very perceptive. The man came down to Annette and said that he couldn't explain anything now. He himself wasn't entirely sure. He needed to figure everything out. The duke said that he would tell the princess all the details later, and she hesitantly said that she understood everything. The man picked up little Annette and was about to go, but she shyly asked to let her go because she was capable of walking on her own, but the duke refused because the princess was wounded and it would be faster this way. The man yelled at the child and said that he was not his son until he awakened his power. The boy looked at his father with fear. The father grabbed his son and, shouting, told him to remember that he was from the imperial family, which meant he had to awaken the greatest power, and if it was weak, then he would be of no use. Mikhail slept restlessly. Perhaps he was having nightmares. Charlotte fell asleep next to her son. Lucius came into the room and carefully threw a blanket over his wife. As he left, the emperor took one last look at his family and closed the door. Lucius came to the fountain. It was already late at night outside. The garden of the rear palace was designed as a training ground for the imperial family from the very beginning of the palace's construction. He was protected by powerful barriers, and yet it was still incredible, the emperor thought. Lucius looked thoughtfully at the water in the fountain and remembered the awakening of the force. Little Lucius fell hard to the ground, hitting his head. His father called him a talentless fool who had not awakened the power at 15 and declared that Lucius was a disgrace to the Arcana family. The man said that nothing could be done. Starting next week, Cardan would train with Lucius. But the boy was indignant because Cardian was only 3 years old. How could such a little one do anything? His father interrupted him and said that age was not important. The blood of the Arcans also flows in Cardian, and according to historical records, the power of the Arcan family should awaken at the age of 5. The man became angry. Was Lucius really afraid that the bastard would awaken the power before him and take the place of the crown prince? Lucius exclaimed in fear that he was not afraid of this. The father turned around and said that then his son had better wake up quickly, otherwise Cardan, whom he cared about so much, would also be training. Eventually that night Lucius woke up. He thought that if he finally did this, his father would not be so harsh with Cardan. How wrong he was. The duke appeared in the shadows and called out to his brother, which frightened him. The man asked if he had disturbed his brother's thoughts. Lucius said that the duke had scared him and asked why he had come from there. Cardan replied that he had been trying to figure out what had happened during the day. But the backyard has already been restored with the help of magic, but the duke still has some suspicions about today's incident. Lucius asked why his brother had removed that annoying mask, and he replied that the princess was already asleep and that only members of their family could enter here. The emperor said that it would be better if Cardan no longer wore the mask. He tells him this as an older brother. The duke asked if Michael had awakened, and although the emperor knew, he did not tell anyone. The emperor asked his brother not to even start. The duke's daughter-in-law had already scolded him. The duke said that it was understandable, since Michael was only supposed to wake up at 10. The man asked if that was the only reason Lucius was silent. Cardan asked if Lucius had kept silent because Michael's power was the same as the late emperor's. The emperor also noticed this, but Michael's abilities seemed to be much stronger than those of the late emperor. The duke chuckled and said that at best he could move a glass of water, but the emperor had many concerns about such great power. Lucius said that power depends on the life energy of the carrier. The greater it is, the higher the risk. He hid Michael's awakening primarily for himself. Strength usually awakens and grows stronger in times of danger, which is why the emperor was so cruel to his sons. But Lucius did not want to be like that, so he worried about how to raise his son, and did not tell anyone. The duke said that his brother's problem was that he was too serious. According to his mother, everything was subject to her wishes, except for her children, who were never what she wanted. Cardan said teasingly that in this case Lucius had told Michael not to see Audrey. The emperor would exclaim that his son did not yet have sufficient control over his power. Who knows what might happen? The duke said that was most likely the reason, but thanks to it, he hoped that Michael had learned his lesson. Until they teach Mikhail to control his powers, he can be dangerous not only to himself, but also to those around him. The emperor agreed with the duke that if it weren't for the princess, everything could have ended in disaster, so Lucius was going to explain everything to Her Highness. Including his power, by the way, as the emperor said, it is better to find the root of the problem and its solution. Lucius said that he was indebted to her. He could not simply stand by while his benefactress was in trouble. The duke asked what if the emperor's power had no effect on the princess. But for this reason, Lucius once secretly tested it on Annette. The emperor asked if his brother remembered that he had given the princess the cleansing stone. It was at that moment that Lucius tested his powers on Lady Hayworth. While handing over the stone, the emperor looked at the princess. At this point, Lucius sped up Annette's time by about a week. The princess says that she wants to immediately return to her previous appearance, and he is ready to help her. The duke was saddened by the last words that the princess wanted to regain her appearance, but he could not contradict her wishes. The next day, everyone gathered in the hall, and someone said that the princess had been very amazing yesterday. This incident is an accident caused by an ability called the power of the imperial family, the emperor explained, although Annette had already guessed it herself. The princess thought so. She had heard about this power of the imperial family when she was in Hayworth, a powerful force that awakens when the empire is in danger, but over the years, the Arkan Empire has grown ever more powerful. The imperial family's power was becoming less and less evident, and since nothing was officially disclosed, Annette believed it was just a legend. Charlotte said that yesterday's incident happened because little time had passed since Mikhail woke up, and he still cannot fully control himself. The princess was surprised that the empress was telling everything in such detail, probably because she was a witness. The emperor told the princess that his power was linked to time. Lucius cannot control all of time in this world, but he can turn it back for a specific place or person. The emperor also said that one could make a minute feel like a year, or make 10 years fly by in an instant, but the princess did not understand why he was saying this. Annette asked the emperor if it was possible to use this power to return her to her former body. Lucius replied that it was quite possible. The princess hesitated a little before making her request. The duke looked at Annette expectantly. He liked the way the princess looked now, and perhaps did not want her to return to her former appearance. Annette asked forgiveness from His Majesty, and said that she would use his help in an emergency. The princess asked if the emperor meant to say that she could quickly return to her former body. Lucius confirmed her words. He wants to repay Annette for her help. The princess was surprised that he was telling her such a big secret just because of yesterday. Annette wondered why he was only talking about this possibility now. The emperor and empress had been kind to her. If they returned her body, all obstacles to the wedding would disappear. Is there really any risk in this? The princess thought that this was certainly the case. The emperor said he would do it as soon as she wished. Annette asked if there were any restrictions on using the emperor's power, such as activation conditions, or maybe there is some price for it. The empress nervously covered her mouth with her hand, and the emperor hesitated. Lucius closed his eyes sadly and said that everything was correct. The power of the imperial family was fed by the life energy of the host. The princess clarified what was meant by life energy. The emperor explained that it is not directly related to life expectancy. It is energy that can be fully restored through rest and sleep. The princess said that she understood him. The Emperor said that we would then return Annette's body, since everything had been explained. But Annette said that he would only use his help as a last resort. Lucius said he knew what the princess was thinking, but it wouldn't be difficult for him. Annette replied that she was not completely refusing help, but that the Duke had already contacted the magician, and she was ready to put up with the inconvenience until the results appeared. Charlotte asked who the magician was, and the Duke replied that Martin had come yesterday. The Empress asked if Martin was not an imperial magician. The Duke said that he was. The magician took some of Annette's blood to find out the cause of this condition. The princess became sad. She was 24, and now she looks about 8 years old. She needs to get back to at least 10, and this is not easy even for the Emperor. The prince said not to worry, there would probably be other ways, but the Duke said that since Annette had decided so, he agreed. The princess pouted and looked at the Duke. Carden smiled sweetly at the lady. The Emperor agreed with them, but they cannot postpone the royal wedding forever. If they do not find a solution within 3 months, they will use Lucius's power. The power the princess had only read about actually exists, and she needs to find a solution within 3 months. Annette has a bit of a headache. The princess closed her eyes and listened to the sounds. Annette said she knew he was there, and Mikhail immediately jumped out of the bushes. The princess turned around and asked Mikhail what he was doing here. The prince ran up to Annette happily and said that he was curious if she was really his uncle's princess. Annette said that was true, although political marriage partner was a more accurate description. Michael exclaimed that the princess was so cool when the gazebo collapsed. She dodged it so deftly, just perfect. The prince hinted that the Duke had spoken of the princess, and she asked what he had said. Michael said that he had heard a lot about the princess from his uncle. Annette asked what exactly the Duke had said about her. The prince tried to remember the word his uncle had used to describe the princess. Annette tensed up, wondering what the Duke had managed to say about her. Could it be something about her curse, the ominous red eyes and something like that? But the prince said that the Duke had spoken of respect, that the princess was the person he respected more than anyone else in the world. The princess was delighted when she learned that the Duke had spoken of her in this way. Mikhail asked if it was true that the princess was stronger than her uncle. She replied that she had not fought with him, so she did not know. Suddenly, the Duke himself approached the boys and said that the princess would win. Michael was delighted to see his uncle and rushed into his arms. The Duke asked if the prince would become taller than him since he had awakened the power. The prince asked his uncle if he really would have lost to the princess. The Duke said that it was the absolute truth. Could he have raised his hand against her? The princess was surprised when she learned what the Duke meant by defeat. Cardian said that a guest and the Empress were waiting for Mikhail in the reception room, and the prince immediately hurried there. Michael ran to the reception room, and the princess asked where the Duke was. Carden replied that he was returning from Martin. There was no particular progress. He said that the research would take time. The Duke also bought the princess a gift on the way. Carden said he bought it at the capital's most famous pastry shop, since Annette loves sweets. There were sweets in the box. The princess threw one candy into her mouth and beamed at the taste. The Duke felt relieved when he saw that Annette liked it. Carden told the princess to enjoy her candy while he carried her to the reception area on his long legs. The Duke picked Annette up in his arms, but she was indignant and hit him on the chest so hard that it hurt. Where the princess hit him, there will now be a bruise. The Duke asked her to be gentle. The princess was surprised when she saw Mikhail and asked why he didn't come in. Mikhail said that he felt a little awkward coming in. The princess asked if something was wrong. Charlotte came out to the noise and noticed everyone there. The Empress sternly asked Mikhail where he had been since guests were waiting. Lady Melon told the Empress that everything was fine. Audrey of the Marquisate of Melan greeted His Highness the Crown Prince, little son of the Empire, and His Grace, the Grand Duke of Hargent. The princess was glad to see that Audrey was okay. Audrey apologized for not recognizing Princess Hayworth right away last time. The princess did not understand what this situation was and why they both sat down next to her. Now that Annette thinks about it, Audrey, when greeting her, clearly called her Princess Hayworth. So Lady Melon knows exactly who she is, so why isn't she afraid? Isn't she aware of the rumors about Annette? Audrey sighed and said that if the prince had nothing to say, then she would go, but Mikhail stopped her. The prince modestly asked if Audrey was afraid of his strength. Lady Melon replied that she was not afraid, because the Crown Prince's power was not meant to harm anyone. She said that this is a power for defense, not attack, so there is no need to be embarrassed about it, while the princess sat and did not understand why she was in the center of the showdown. Audrey remembered that she never thanked the princess for the incident in the garden when she came to. The Dowager Empress told her everything. Lady Melon thanked Princess Hayworth for saving her life, but she said it was nothing. Audrey said she had heard something about Annette and immediately began to think about a monster. The girl said that she had never seen such beautiful eyes and hair. Audrey said that the princess is as beautiful as a rose. Lady Melon's hair is as black as night. That's why she is so envious of Annette's bright scarlet hair. Michael exclaimed that this was not so, and Audrey also had a beautiful hair color, better than her aunt's, but the lady said that it was because the prince was in love with her. Charlotte said Audrey was a smart girl, and she didn't gossip about who Annette really was, and the Duke said he hadn't worried about it at first. Cardian just felt like even the children had taken the princess away from him, and the Empress now understood why he looked so tense. The Duke watched the princess and decided, "I decided that since Annette was having so much fun, let it be so." The Duke said the children must have been sweet. He had never seen the princess laugh so freely before. Cardian said that Annette's smile was also very sweet. He asked if he should take her to her room, because she must have become ill after talking to the children. The princess shyly refused and said that she had enough strength to get there on her own. She asked the Duke not to treat her like a child. Just like last time, the Duke treats the princess like a little girl. The princess remembered how the Duke asked her to take care of her body. After those words in the garden, Annette couldn't sleep all night. She didn't understand at all how to take care of her body. Compared to the wounds from battles with monsters, this scratch is nothing. The princess was used to enduring such pain, but to take care of her body, Annette did not understand what it meant to take care of anything at all. Annette remembered the Duke, how he asked her to take care of herself, his look. The Duke suggested that they go together. He asked if the princess was angry because he always treated her like a child. Carden said Annette has no idea how sweet she is. In fact, there was one question that bothered the princess most. The question is, what expression is hidden behind this mask? Is it sincere, or is it just a mockery and deception aimed at Annette, who has become a child again? The princess said that she was not angry and was going down to dinner. She asked if the Duke would go to the banquet with the Dowager Empress and the Emperor. The Duke said that because of the mask, he usually eats separately. They say the Duke's face was disfigured by the monster's blood, the princess recalled. Carden must have eaten dinner with his family all his life, and now he must feel lonely eating all by himself. The princess also ate alone almost her entire life, until she again discovered the joy of sharing a meal. Annette thought about perhaps inviting the Duke to dine with her, but if he ate with me, he would have to take off his mask. Wouldn't he be embarrassed? The princess decided to change the subject. She said that there was something she would like to do. The Duke asked what exactly she wanted. The Duke was surprised that the princess wanted to learn etiquette. He had not been taught good manners as a child. The princess was also interested in learning the history of the Arkan Empire, so Annette asked if she could visit the library. Annette noticed that the Duke immediately asked what she wanted, but was he doing it for her sake, or was he asking for someone else's sake? The Duke said that the library and any other place were all at the princess's disposal. Annette couldn't believe her ears. An unexpected stroke of luck. The princess had always loved to read only the forgotten volumes in the annex and the old tomes from the Imperial Library. Now Annette remembered that Franz had also helped her with the books. Franz Hayworth, the eldest son of King Hayworth and Annette's elder brother until the death of Annette and Franz's mother, was raised as the crown prince. However, when Annette was born, their mother died and Esther became queen, leaving Franz a burden. He is weak in body and always sits in his room, but it was he who got books about monsters for Annette. She also got something for her sister's training in exterminating monsters. Franz is Annette's only brother. The princess wondered how her brother was doing now. The Duke asked why the princess suddenly wanted to know about the empire and the Grand Duchy. Annette said that the Arkan Empire was now like her home country, and the Grand Duchy of Harjent was the place where she would live. So it was only natural that the princess wanted to know about them. Annette was surprised that this was the first time she had spoken about her true feelings like this. For a moment, the Duke looked at the princess in silence, blushing all over. The Duke said he was happy and thanked the princess for her interest. While we were on the subject, the Duke asked why Annette didn't visit another place besides the Imperial Library. Carden invited the princess to visit the library of their castle. The Duke said that his men had left the Grand Duchy and would arrive tomorrow by noon. Cardian suggested sending them immediately after lunch. The princess said that they weren't even married yet, and Carden was already saying that the castle was theirs. But the Duke didn't see anything wrong with that, and it would soon be that way. But the princess did not expect such a quick departure tomorrow. The Duke ordered his people to ride day and night to pick up Annette as soon as possible. The others don't know yet, but the news will probably spread by tomorrow morning, because he plans to tell his mother this evening. The princess asked if this was too sudden. The Duke replied no. Cardian said that the princess was too popular. If he stayed here, it would be difficult for him to snatch even a piece of her attention, so they would leave as soon as possible. The next day, the knights of the Grand Duchy arrived and greeted the mistress of the Grand Ducal House with one voice. Yesterday, at the palace of the Dowager Empress, the Duke showed up to see his mother late at night. Cardan said that he missed her, but the Empress didn't believe him and asked him to tell her why he came. The Duke asked what the mother thought of the princess. The Empress said that the girl was too good for him. Cardan agreed that the princess was a delight. The mother said that, contrary to rumors, Annette was quite ordinary. The Empress had heard that the princess did not have a proper education, but she grew up to be a simple and pure girl. The Duke said that the rumors were just rumors. He asked his mother if she was angry with the princess. The mother asked why she had any reason to be upset with Annette. Cardan said he wished his son could live without that suffocating mask, but his mother knew there was no other way. The Empress seemed angry and ordered her son to remove the bandage from his face. She added that she did not want to talk to the screen. Such words upset Cardian a little. But he had to show his face at least once before leaving, so that the Empress would not forget what her handsome son looked like. The woman sighed heavily and thought that it would be better if he had not said this, and then asked where he was going after all. He and the princess were planning to go to the Grand Duchy tomorrow and asked his mother not to make such an indignant face, since nothing could be changed anyway. He also asked not to interfere with them in any way, since the princess might change her mind because of this. And the sooner they leave for the Grand Duchy, the sooner the Empress will be able to see her grandchildren. And she definitely really wanted to quickly acquire cute grandchildren, at least 2. The woman was a little indignant that her son was teasing her and noted that it was clearly bad form, but Cardian was absolutely serious. The Empress asked only that he treat the princess well, to which the son replied that of course he remembered this. Before leaving, he said that he would write often and hinted that they would see each other tomorrow. The Empress remained sitting alone in the room and did not understand where he got his stubbornness from. Her hand slowly reached out to the box. Now seemed like the perfect time to get it. Meanwhile, Mikhail was lying on the ground, screaming and waving his arms in different directions, asking his aunt not to go and not to leave him here alone. The whole family crowded around him and did not understand what could be done to calm the boy. Charlotte tried to persuade him to behave with dignity and calm down because he was the crown prince and should not throw such tantrums. Mikhail was upset that this was happening so suddenly, especially since Annette had promised to teach him fencing, but the girl said that she would return soon. After these words, the boy's eyes sparkled. Annette will need to return for the royal wedding, and then she will help him with fencing, although she herself is not sure that she will be of much use. Charlotte kindly suggested that they not say goodbye as if they would never see each other again, but that she only wanted them to meet again soon in good health. There was also news that betrothal gifts would be sent to the Hayworth Kingdom today, everything from the list of gifts that were sent last time. The list of gifts was so long that even the king was surprised. It was too much, Annette thought. Kalian noted that it was not at all, and smiled discreetly under his mask. After all, Annette is worth much more, Charlotte added, and that is not even enough to accept the princess into the Arkan Empire. The Duke dropped to one knee and repeated that Annette should not even think that there were too many gifts. He believed that even this was not enough. Suddenly, the sound of horses' hooves was heard. The knights from the castle arrived. They were already very close. They all bowed their heads as one and greeted the princess, the lady of the Grand Ducal House. Annette felt uneasy that everyone was looking at her, and she quietly asked Kalian if they weren't surprised. "Of course not," replied the Duke. "It would be strange if they were surprised to see the lady of the Grand Duchy. Rather, Kalian is afraid that they will go crazy over the beauty of the princess." There was a pause, and Samuel intervened, saying that it was time to pull himself together. Preparations for departure were completed, and everyone was just waiting for the Duke's order. He said that one more person was missing, but then the Empress appeared, and it was she he was talking about. She apologized for being late and asked permission to speak with the princess alone. Annette stood with her eyes wide open, and of course she couldn't say no. She agreed. They headed together to a deserted place, and the girl decided to start the conversation first. She quietly called the Empress. Cardian asked his mother not to be upset, but she could not be sad about Annette's departure. She said that she did not know that the princess would leave so soon, so she had only a few dresses in store as a gift for Annette, and the Empress ordered them to be put in the carriage. Annette didn't even know how to express the gratitude that filled her heart. In just a few days, she was able to get used to dresses that she had never worn before. Only because, unlike the bulky outfits of the Hayworth family, the Empress tailored them to the needs of the wearer. Annette even wanted to say that during this time the Empress had given her much more than she deserved. The woman took out that very box and said that she wanted to give it to the princess personally and not load it with all the other things into the carriage. She had brought these ornaments from her family home a long time ago. The necklace and earrings were always given in pairs, but she gave the necklace to the Empress. And now she said something important to Annette. Just as Cardian is her son, so Annette is now like a daughter to the Empress. She thanked the princess with all her heart for coming into their family and becoming a part of it, becoming her daughter. The princess couldn't hold back her tears from such words. She couldn't even remember the last time she cried so hard. It seemed like the first time she had cried so hard since Sarah died. But now everything feels completely different. These are different tears. Cardian immediately came up to them and started asking Mom why she made Annette cry. The burning feeling inside, which the girl had been holding back for so long, finally became unbearable and burst out. Most likely, she will remember this moment for a long time. When they were already riding in the carriage, the princess shyly asked Cardian not to tease her and lowered her gaze to the floor, to which the man replied that he was very scared when he found out that she went to his mother alone. Annette apologized, but the Duke asked her not to do this and added that sometimes it was good to cry a little. But his only request was that the girl would cry only when he was around, so that he could give her a handkerchief like that time. After which he said that he had a letter for the princess. These words surprised Annette. She did not understand what letter he was talking about. In fact, the Marquise's daughter asked him to convey to Annette that it was a letter from Audrey. The princess took the piece of paper in her hands and began to read with anxiety. She couldn't even imagine what was written there. Audrey wrote asking if she could visit Annette at the duchy, and wrote that she wanted to recommend some books so that the princess wouldn't get bored. And the next time they meet, it would be nice to give everyone small gifts. Annette had received so much and now wanted to give something in return. Cardian intervened and added that if the girl really wanted it, he would be happy to help. It was already getting dark outside and the carriage gradually stopped. They reported that they had arrived at a clearing near the lake. It was already late, so it looked like they would have to spend the night in this place. The Duke asked if the princess would mind spending the night in a tent. She often slept like this while hunting monsters, so everything is fine. The problem is that Annette has become too used to it. As he stepped out of the carriage, the Duke respectfully and carefully offered his hand to the princess and asked her to step carefully. Annette was embarrassed that the Cardian called her princess, and so she smiled awkwardly, but did not say anything about it. But then someone called out to the Duke. He was asked to come over and look at something. Cardian apologized to Annette and said that he would be back soon. The girl had been observing the knights for some time, and they seemed well-mannered to her. The condition of their armor, weapons, and carriages was in excellent condition. She sat and thought about knights, namely about the order of the Knights of Hayworth being in order. Annette was completely immersed in her thoughts and stopped hearing everything that was happening around her. She just looked at the bright light from the fire. Memories of her past life flashed through her mind, when she could fight against monsters, when she controlled the knights on her own and always asked them not to give up. The entire knightly order was on her side when they were hunting, despite the fact that her relatives at home certainly underestimated her. She remembers how the knights would whisper in the evenings about how incredible the princess was in battle. Before this, they only knew rumors, but when they first saw her in action, they were completely delighted. One of them said with a smile that she really was amazing. He even called her a legend, to which the second replied that he was being too obvious, probably because he was new. She also overheard that the knights' budget had been cut again. This was unpleasant for everyone, and the guys began to get indignant. They say the Treasury Department turned down their request, apparently because they were a motley crew and not noble knights. Although it was possible that they were the most skilled of all, it was funny that they were paid less than the guys from the Royal Guard. These words upset Annette, and she even regretted that she heard this conversation. Things were bad. This month one of the knights had to pay off loans. They continued their conversation, but unfortunately, no one could help him. No one could lend him money, because each of them had their own problems and needs. They thought that if the commander allowed them to keep the trophies after hunting monsters, then they would all be able to cover all their needs and problems. But they knew perfectly well that all the trophies from the hunt belonged to the royal family. Annette thought that if she diligently exterminated the monsters from the royal lands, then everything would work out. But this was a big misconception. In fact, they were just servants who worked for the royal family. The princess's thoughts were suddenly interrupted by Cardian, who was already looking for her. He brought Annette soup for dinner and asked what she was thinking about. "Nothing," the girl replied and looked at the soup. It looked very good and had just cooled down. Georg began to hold out a spoon with soup towards the girl, which clearly surprised her. Did he really want to conquer her himself? Annette smiled and said that she could eat herself. The Duke knew this, but now he wanted to feed the princess himself. He looked at the girl for a long time with a smile and held a spoon with soup. After which, without waiting for Annette's approval, he still handed the dinner towards the little girl. Cardian thought it was very sweet. His heart was captured again. He had been thinking about it for a long time, but recently he was convinced of something. And in what way? Annette asked, raising her eyes to the Duke. When they have a child, Cardian is confident that he will be a good father to the child. For example, he will put the child to bed. Annette suddenly jumped up without answering, which alerted Cardian. He didn't even have time to blink before the princess seemed to have vanished. She ran into the carriage with lightning speed. The Duke didn't understand what was wrong with her, since Annette hadn't even finished her meal, but then Samuel intervened, explaining that his words sounded very strange, and one could even say depraved. The Duke didn't like this, but the boy added that he had just been talking about children with a girl who looked like a child herself. But this is not what Cardian meant at all. He began to worry that the princess would think badly or incorrectly of him after this. It was necessary to clear up this misunderstanding. Meanwhile, Annette sat in the carriage and thought that she was going crazy. Words about the child were spinning in her head. She didn't understand what to do, because now we were talking about real family life. At the same time, in the Eastern Mountains, there is an outpost of the Hayworth Knightly Order for the extermination of demonic beasts. The issue of losses was discussed. The number of wounded and killed had doubled compared to the last time. If this continued, the very existence of the order would be under threat. John Villadre, the second in command of the Royal Knights Order of Hayworth, was at a loss to think that the order was in jeopardy simply because one commander had left. Someone suddenly turned to the deputy commander. He said that all the wounded had received treatment, there were no serious injuries, and they would be able to return as soon as they had undergone purification at the temple. John was interested in the results of the raid on the demonic beasts. This cleanup seemed to take twice as long as usual. The knights expected the absence of their commander to have an effect, but they didn't think it would be this long. It's not for nothing that people laugh at the Hayworth Knights, saying that they take anyone they can get, regardless of status, but in fact they have plenty of talent that is not inferior to the famous knights of the Grand Duke of Harzent, and it was the commander who made their order like that. Just think, they won't even arrange a farewell ceremony for the captain, who raised the prestige of the order. The knight thought that His Majesty had gone too far. Besides, she wasn't just wounded for nothing. The commander suffered while protecting a new recruit. She meant so much to the order. The knight hoped that the authorities would now understand what a stupid thing they had done. But then the deputy approached the Brahmin and asked him to watch his language, as it was not proper for a knight of the royal order to speak like that. He apologized, of course. A royal knight should not utter such words, but is there anyone in this order who truly loves His Majesty the King? They say that the king hates their commander, so he doesn't raise the budget again, who in their opinion made such a tiny country like Hayworth prosperous. In fact, the entire order has always been on the captain's side. The number of demonic beasts captured in this raid was only a fifth of what it had been before. Perhaps because of this, His Majesty will bring the commander back, Brahmin inquired, and heard the answer that as soon as the commander recovered from his wounds, she would return. Annette was sitting in the carriage at that time and could not recover from the shock of how he could think and say that they would have a child. She remembered that Cardian had offered to come to her and rock her if the princess had trouble sleeping at night. She didn't even remember anyone ever saying that to her. Even as a child, no one ever rocked little Annette to sleep. That's not the way children are raised in Hayworth. These thoughts haunted her. But today we still have to spend the night in this village. It was again a memory from the past, when he and the knight stopped for the night in a strange place. She asked the deputy to go and buy food and water, to which the man pointed out that this was not Hayworth's territory. She didn't answer then, as she was distracted by a child's voice that said, "Sleep sweetly." It was a little boy who rocked his little sister on his back and constantly repeated that she was smart and beautiful. He said that now they would sleep a little and then go. Despite this, they continued to move forward. Annette thought that if she had been born normal and Franz had been healthy, then perhaps she could have lived like this too. That time she really envied those little ones. And yet she did not understand how the Grand Duke could say such a thing in front of everyone. To say that he would carry her on his back so that she could fall asleep, how could such a thing even occur to him? It was a memory that even she herself had forgotten, so he certainly could not know whether she had really told the Duke about it. At that moment he knocked on the carriage window and began to say that there had been a misunderstanding. He said that he didn't care even if she became an old woman and not a child. Cardian asked not to misunderstand him and to listen. He wanted to explain everything personally and asked to open the door. Annette threw open the carriage door and shouted at him to be quiet. He continued again to say that she had thought of everything incorrectly and that he had not thought of the princess in that way. The thing is, he just loves Annette, but the girl covered her face with her hands and screamed again for him to stop. Cardian began to offer different options. Maybe he should send the knights for food, or maybe the princess was in pain. He was very gentle and sensitive at that moment. The knights did not understand whether this was really the same cold and pedantic Grand Duke. This man who hardly sleeps and exterminates demonic beasts without blinking an eye. It's hard to believe that the Duke is actually such a caring simpleton. Perhaps we should just call him a man in love for now. The next day they all set out on their journey again. Cardian brought the princess her favorite cookies in the morning, and she realized one thing during these 2 days with the Grand Duke. He has the gift of the gab. He tells Annette to do whatever she wants, but in the end, everything happens as Cardian planned. And yesterday too, when she said that she would not eat, but gave in at his persuasion, that she was hungry in the night. And after dinner, while brushing your teeth. He talked about how well the princess could brush her teeth, although in her opinion there was nothing special about it. He was so impressed that Annette could do this on her own. He continued to praise the girl for such a simple action, and the knights began to applaud her. She felt terrible. Something was clearly wrong. She was not a child. Her fiancé, who was younger than her, was trying to raise her. Cardian reported that they would arrive at the castle very soon, and the Imperial Mage Martin cast an acceleration spell on the horses. It is not surprising why the Grand Duke arrived in the capital much earlier than expected, most likely. The Duke also got to the Imperial Palace in the same way. Cardian wanted to discuss one important matter before they arrived. This matter could greatly affect their future life in the castle. Now Annette needed to get herself together. She was lucky in the palace and everyone treated her well, but for now she doesn't know what kind of people there are in the Grand Duchy. When she arrives there, she will have to learn everything step by step, from etiquette to obligatory greetings, so that she will gradually understand the role of the Grand Duchess and learn the secrets of this house. But even though she had been a commander for 10 years, managing knights and running a household were two completely different things. If Annette proved what she was capable of, then no one would look at her like a child. But then Cardian again reminded her that he would like to discuss something before arriving. But the princess was determined that no matter what it was, she intended to handle it all. The girl was in complete shock when she heard the Duke's words. He asked her to decide how many desserts the princess would be allowed per day. Although he himself brought her cookies, he remembered hearing a report in the palace that Annette ate too many sweets and neglected regular food. She was outraged because the princess is not a child like Crown Prince Michael and knows how to control herself. Cardian said the girl would be allowed exactly 2 desserts of any kind per day, but it would be absurd if Annette didn't know this sweetness, this tenderness, this airiness 2 a day would barely be enough to wet her throat. Cardian asked to adhere to this rule so that the princess's diet could be adjusted. He was going to order the cook to prepare balanced meals, so there was no need to be upset. The girl became indignant and began to worry because she was already an adult and proper nutrition would not make her grow. Annette was, as always, perfect in Cardian's eyes, and he couldn't understand how anyone could be so sweet. And yet, she has changed a lot since she stopped hiding her true feelings. Annette now expresses her emotions very honestly. The Duke was sure that besides desserts there would be many things there that Annette would like, and he wanted to discover these new things together. The princess turned away and said that in that case she would need 2 more pieces of cake a day, in addition to other desserts, and Cardian could not refuse since she insisted so much. And if she ate well, the Duke promised to increase her dessert ration. The carriage entered the territory of the duchy, and it was time to prepare to leave. Almost there, Annette was very excited to get here. Cardian seemed to sense it and asked the princess himself if she was very worried. She was truly afraid that the people of the Grand Duchy would simply not accept her. But the man was sure that this would never happen, because here were all those who would definitely be charmed by Annette's sweetness. He was sure that everyone would definitely love her. The castle was truly beautiful, and the surrounding nature was also breathtaking. It was announced that the Grand Duke and Grand Duchess had arrived. "Princess, come out carefully," said Cardian and extended his hand to the princess. Although the girl was worried, there was still no turning back. She extended her hand in response and allowed him to help her down. All the servants greeted the Grand Duke. Everything was perfect at that moment. The man introduced himself as Hubert, the head butler. Hubert added that it was an honor for him to serve the Grand Duchess, to which the girl replied that she was also pleased to meet him. She also introduced herself. Her appearance was a surprise to everyone, but she hoped that everyone could become friends. Everyone was so welcoming and smiling so sweetly. Cardian reminded them that he had said so, everything would be fine. So this is what it is, the Grand Duchy of Harzant, the house in which Annette will now live. But suddenly the princess felt someone's gaze on her. She didn't immediately understand whether it was hostility or curiosity, but one of the maids kept her eyes fixed on Annette. But suddenly the head maid appeared in front of her. She introduced herself as Hilda. The woman hoped that they would work together. Annette hoped so too. But she couldn't get it out of her head and understand who this girl was who was watching her so intently. The head maid and the butler were talking, wondering if they had made the wrong choice. Hilda suddenly called a girl named Larissa to her, and the same girl who was watching Annette ran up to her with a smile. The butler announced that Larissa would be serving the princess, and they decided to select a maid for Annette in advance, since she arrived without her maid. Annette didn't immediately understand how to react, but she wanted to extend her hand to Larissa as a sign of introduction. But the girl was so delighted that she would be Annette's personal maid that she couldn't even put two words together. Her eyes were shining, and she kept repeating only that she was happy. Then Cardian came up to check whether Larissa had really received this position, the princess's personal maid. The girl said she proudly won first place in bedmaking, humidification, bathing, origami, and drawing competitions to earn the position. The Duke announced to everyone that from now on everyone should address the girl as my mistress. Annette was embarrassed because the ceremony had not yet taken place, but the Duke did not see any problem with this at all. After all, they were going to get married soon anyway, but Annette was still embarrassed that he was speaking so bluntly. Some of the maids began to whisper, and some blushed with embarrassment. What a smug Duke, Annette thought as she stood in front of all the servants. Cardian asked the girl what was wrong, as she looked very pale, but Annette answered sharply that a cold wind had just blown from somewhere. This caused the man to become worried, saying that his princess should not catch a cold, and Annette realized that she should definitely talk to the Duke about this someday. Larissa began giving the princess a tour of the palace. Annette thought that this girl looked too cheerful. She is the same age as Bridget, so straightforward, pure, and honest. Because the princess looked at Larissa for a long time, she became afraid that something was wrong or that there was something on her face. She began to tell how she woke up at dawn because she was really looking forward to Annette's arrival, washed herself thoroughly, braided her hair, and even put on new clothes. She also said that she studied the rules of etiquette very carefully and was worried that she might have done something wrong in front of Annette. But the princess simply said that Larissa seemed beautiful to her, but the girl was already in a panic and assumed that Annette was upset and that the tour was being conducted by a servant and not the Duke himself. She added that the princess had been stealthily glancing towards the master's office for some time now, but Annette did not think it was so noticeable. Suddenly, Cardian appeared from behind and said that he would give a tour of the house where Annette would now live. But suddenly someone called out to him. It was the butler and other people who looked after the palace, and they reported that a lot of documents had accumulated that required the Duke's approval. It was also necessary to send knights to investigate a group of bandits had recently been spotted near the area. Cardian asked for silence and wanted to say something, but Annette tugged at his sleeve and suggested that they go about their business, as she saw that he had a lot of work to do. She added with a smile that she would ask Larissa to give a tour. There was nothing wrong with that. Cardian was immediately taken away on business, and the princess repeated again that she liked the fact that her tour guide was Larissa. The girl heard that the Duke was the richest in the Arkan Kingdom after the imperial family, and it seemed that this was not a lie, judging by the palace. There were many rooms here, for example, for guests, and some were secretly organized by Cardian for their future children, but now Larissa brought the princess to her room. The girl really hoped that Annette would like everything and invited her in. Annette was absolutely delighted when she found herself inside. All the flowers here were real, not artificial, but preserved with the help of magic. The princess loved everything so much that tears of joy even appeared in her eyes. Larissa was pleased with this answer. In fact, she had designed the entire room herself, from the overall concept to the dolls and decorations. She had chosen everything herself. She is incredibly happy that she won the tournament and became a personal servant. She really worked hard for this moment. The girl asked Annette what she would like to do first, have dinner or maybe take a bath. She decided that it would be better to take a bath first and have dinner when the Grand Duke was free from work. But since dinner was already ready, Larissa offered to accompany the princess to the dining room. Annette was there alone and it was strange. She asked why this happened and where the Duke was. The maid explained that he was still in his office and it looked like he would have a snack there. Annette was interested in how his lordship usually ate. Sometimes he eats in the canteen, and sometimes when he is busy like today, he eats in his office. Annette wondered if Cardian simply didn't want to eat with her, but judging by his behavior, her worries were unfounded. Until now, she thought that this was just a marriage for the sake of an alliance, so she did not pay attention to the Grand Duke, but while she is here, she is going to find out more about what kind of person he is. Annette is certain of one thing: the possessed killer, the Grand Duke, driven mad by the blood of demonic beasts. These rumors are nothing more than speculation, because she saw the behavior of the servants of the ducal house. Everyone bowed respectfully, but there was no fear in them, rather respect, admiration, and devotion to the strong man. They don't seem to care at all about the Duke's face and mask. By the way, everyone in the palace began to hesitate when it came to his food or mask. Perhaps Annette missed something, and the rumors that his appearance had become ugly were also rumors, but she decided not to think about it and to consider that the Grand Duke was simply a good man. When Larissa helped comb her hair, she told him that the Duke was her savior, and she was not sure whether she would be able to repay him even after death. Annette wondered if he could save her as well as he saved Larissa. While bathing, the girl asked the princess whether she was cold or hot. Annette was happy with everything. Larissa added that if the princess finds her name long or complicated, she can simply be called Lala, Riri, or whatever is more convenient. But Annette replied that how could she change her precious name that her parents gave her? However, her parents were not exactly the ones who protected their child. Her father was an inveterate gambler. He wandered from one gambling house to another and was mired in debt, so he tried to sell her as a servant. It was more than 5 years ago, and when she was about to be sold, Larissa was saved by the Grand Duke. Soon after her rescue, hostilities began, and Annette heard that in the old Arkan Empire, kidnapping and slave trafficking were a national problem. Emperor Lucius tried to fight this, but the situation only worsened, and then it turned out that the Empire of Bendor was involved in everything. Then the war between the two countries began, and after 2 years of fighting, the Arkan Empire won. And the Grand Duke of Cardian, who fought on the front lines, was hailed as a war hero. So Larissa became one of those victims, but that's not all. Larissa's mother was also saved by Cardian. Most likely all the servants in this palace owe their lives to the Duke, so Larissa swore to serve him until her death. After taking a bath, the table was again prepared for Annette in case she got hungry. The princess cautiously wanted to ask one more thing about the Grand Duke. But suddenly she changed her mind and simply invited Larissa to sit down with her and have dinner, but the girl refused and asked not to worry about her, but to enjoy herself. Annette wondered if the Grand Duke had returned from the war covered in the blood of demonic creatures, if he had been in despair then, if he had suffered. Larissa must have known him from those times the princess was interested in what he was hiding behind the mask and what she still didn't know. Surely Larissa also knows about the time when he was famous for his beauty, and whether Larissa feels only devotion to Cardian as her savior. Or she could have developed other, more tender feelings for him, because he is so kind, and suddenly many women like him. Annette wouldn't mind if the Grand Duke took a mistress, she thought, and then caught herself wondering how she could have even thought about such a thing. Thank God she didn't say it out loud. If the Grand Duke had taken a mistress, and they also had a child, Annette began to think, after which she collapsed unconscious right into the plate standing in front of her. This greatly alarmed Larissa. She began to ask what had happened and whether the princess might not have liked something. But she reassured the maid, saying that everything was fine, and when they walked into the room, Annette thought that if Larissa had been in love with Cardian, she would not have taken such good care of her. The girl said that she would make the bed so that Annette could come straight away and lie down to rest. The princess thought that it seemed like she really had become a child again. After washing and eating, she felt very sleepy, but for now the princess tried to hold on. Larissa was a little worried that something was still wrong and offered to bring a cup of hot chocolate before bed. She meant hot chocolate with marshmallows, and Annette was interested and asked to make that. But suddenly they both heard a harsh no. It was Duke Cardian, who reminded them of Annette's promise about sweets. The girl was surprised how he ended up here. Did he really run out of work? He replied that there was still a lot of work to do, but he just decided to check on her before going to bed. He asked Annette seriously how many desserts she had had for dinner, to which she replied that none, so she thought she could use a little something sweet at the end of the day. She repeated again that she had said that she was no longer a child. Cardian knew this very well, but he believed that sweets were harmful for everyone at night. The Duke asked if they would go brush their teeth, but the princess asked him not to follow her and also refused to show Cardian her room. Meanwhile, in the kingdom of Hayworth, in confident hands is a letter from the Arcana. It seems that the Empire is also unhappy with the spawn of the demonic beast. The knights assumed that this letter was a request for the return of Princess Bridget. But suddenly their conversation was interrupted by a loud sound from someone hitting the table. King Justian thought that it looked like this girl had messed things up again and was extremely dissatisfied. At the palace, the maids and Cardian himself followed Annette around. The girls offered hot chocolate and roses to fill the bath. But Annette refused everything. She was clearly offended by the Grand Duke, who said that she was not allowed sweets at night. But soon the girl turned around and asked how long Cardian was going to follow her. He replied that he just wanted to help the princess brush her teeth. For some reason, she suddenly asked whether the Duke had had tooth decay as a child, to which he replied that he had not. Annette can take care of herself just as well, so she said that the Duke could leave from here. Annette also refused Larissa's offer to help with bathing. But suddenly she thought that in this case the Duke and Larissa should leave together, and therefore abruptly changed her decision and asked Larissa to stay. Cardian was puzzled why the princess chose the maid and not him. Sometime later, Annette found the Duke sitting quietly on a chair in her room. He intended to stay until the princess fell asleep. Larissa then came out of the bathroom and offered to help dry my hair. But the girl and the Duke's glances met. Cardian silently hinted that it was time for Larissa to leave, and she immediately informed Annette about this. She's not that stupid, Cardian thought. In fact, he came to say something, and not to sing lullabies as the princess thought. She wondered what kind of news he wanted to tell her. But Cardian decided to report this tomorrow since today is too late for this. And stroking the girl on the head, she wished her princess sweet dreams. She also wished him sweet dreams in return, and suggested finishing work early. But after these words, she herself became embarrassed. When the Cardian turned towards her, Annette was already completely covered with a blanket. She covered her face with her hands out of fear and completely lost her desire to sleep. Most likely, she would not be able to sleep tonight. It seems that the delegation sent to Arcan was attacked by demonic beasts. But were they all killed? They say that Annette barely made it to the Empire and everyone else abandoned her. But no one returned, including Count Randall. They abandoned Annette and ran away and probably died on the way back. Arcan demanded that each of them who failed to fulfill their duty be punished, and if they did not return alive, then they demand that their families be punished in their place. Baron Verdi noted that this could be Arcan's version, and that in reality they died fighting the animals and protecting Annette. The king asked to stop and bring everyone involved in that delegation. The king believed that it would be better for Annette to die than to force him to bow to such a demand of Arcan. Verdi tried to calm the king. Just look at the engagement gifts. They were all sent exactly as per the list. In any case, the Arcan Empire wants to hold the wedding as planned. And as for the gifts, this is only a part. The rest is placed in the royal treasury. Indeed, the wedding between Arcan and Hayworth is a great and joyful event. The king ordered that the queen and princess be invited to the treasury so that they could take from there whatever they wanted. He inquired how much time had passed since the Knights of Hayworth had set out on their journey. The deputy lowered his head. It's been about 2 weeks already. Isn't it time for them to come back? It can't be that the commander abandoned us and went to the Arcan Empire, the guy in the temple shouted. The king, meanwhile, was confused as to why it was taking so long. He approached the Marquis of Willard, John Willard's father, and asked him what he thought about it, who kept his mouth shut, as if it didn't concern him, even though his own son was now the commander. Is there a colder father anywhere? The knights in the temple were perplexed. They didn't understand if it was true that a new Grand Duchess had appeared in the Arcan Empire. The priest was surprised that the knights knew nothing about this. Willard asked him to calm down and calmly tell who got married. And when the information was announced that Annette had married the Grand Duke of Cardian Harchent, the priest was immediately grabbed by the clothes. The guy shouted that this was complete nonsense and that this couldn't be happening. He shouted that the priest was lying. The others began to ask Luke to calm down. They also asked the priest not to be upset, adding that their soldier knew little, which is why he was so upset. And then Willard abruptly ordered to finish the cleansing and leave. Luke was worried that the commander had suffered because of him and was very upset, but this was still not confirmed. He needed to return to the nightmare and find out the truth. It is possible that the priests really did get something mixed up. It couldn't be that the commander would abandon everyone like that after all. They had all served her for 10 years. She certainly wouldn't have left without saying goodbye. So there was no need to be discouraged, but she rarely showed any signs of agitation, even when she encountered demonic beasts. Even when the king humiliated her in front of the entire knightly order, from childhood she knew only humiliation. That's why her soul became hardened. She didn't even have a chance to build normal human relationships. And although her comrades supported her, they did not show it, so she most likely did not notice their concern. In other words, she was unlikely to be attached to this order, and most likely she could leave here with a light heart. "Let's go to the palace immediately," Willard suddenly shouted. He wanted to see and hear everything with his own ears. He needed to find out if the feast was in Hayworth. Annette, meanwhile, woke up in a cozy and warm bed. Larissa immediately stood next to her and asked how she slept. It was almost lunchtime. Annette probably slept for so long for the first time. She slept so well, she didn't even dream. She seemed to be a little hungry, which she informed the maid about. Since the princess missed breakfast, Larissa tried to prepare a hearty lunch for her. It was really very tasty. Annette ate everything. Even the plates were shining, and she felt embarrassed about it. She thought that if she ate so much every time, she probably wouldn't even want sweets. But then Larissa came up and said that after dinner the Duke asked her to come to his office for just a minute. But if you think about it, Annette wanted to talk to him too. The princess offered to take her to Cardian right now. He asked her not to worry so much and said that he would like to show Annette his face under the mask, which greatly surprised the bride.